Night shift at work. Story 1. It was the fall of 2017 in rural Maine when I took a job as the night security guard at an old abandoned hospital. I was 24 and eager to prove myself. I figured it would be easy money, just me patrolling empty hallways from dusk till dawn. How hard could it be? I thought. Little did I know that one stormy October night would become the scariest experience of my life. From the first week on the job, the building gave me the creeps. The hospital had been shut down for years, a maze of dark corridors and vacant rooms. The electricity barely worked, so most nights I relied on my flashlight. The silence was eerie, broken only by the echo of my own footsteps or the occasional drip of a leaky pipe. I told myself those sounds were normal. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't quite alone. One of the older guards joked the place was haunted. He claimed he'd seen shadows in the corners and once heard a child's laughter in an empty ward. I laughed it off. I don't believe in ghosts, but alone on those long nights, every little creak made my heart jump. One particularly stormy night, rain was pounding on the windows and the power was flickering. Around 2 a.m., I was making my rounds on the 3rd floor, the old pediatric wing, when I heard a soft thump down the hall, like something had fallen. I halted and held my breath, listening. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing. There was no answer, just distant thunder. I decided it was probably the wind or the old building settling. I continued a bit more cautiously. Then I heard it again, a thump followed by a faint scraping sound, like a chair dragging on the floor. It came from the playroom at the end of the hall. That door was ajar, even though I was sure I'd closed it earlier. My pulse quickened. Gritting my teeth, I approached and nudged the door open with my flashlight. Inside, my light played over dusty children's chairs and peeling murals on the walls. In the corner, a little plastic chair lay toppled on the floor, likely the source of the noise. I exhaled, telling myself it was just gravity or a draft. I stepped in and set the chair upright, my nerves settling for a moment. Suddenly, I heard rapid footsteps above me. It sounded like someone running on the roof. My stomach dropped. There shouldn't be anyone up there. The hospital has only 3 floors, and I was on the top one. Maybe an animal on the roof, but it sounded too heavy for a raccoon. My mind raced through possibilities, and I decided I had to check the stairwell that led up there. Stepping back into the hallway, I noticed something that sent a chill through me. The door to the roof access stairwell, which I always kept locked, was now wide open, rainwater puddling on the floor. I knew I had locked it at the start of my shift. My mouth went dry, and my blood ran cold at the sight. Someone had to be inside the building with me. I needed to get out and call the police. I started backing away, intending to head for the stairwell at the far end of the corridor that led down to the ground floor and out of the building. As I moved, I shouted, "Security! Who's there? You need to leave immediately." My voice came out steadier than I felt. No response, just the storm howling outside. Then, from the darkness of the open stairwell door, I heard a sound that nearly stopped my heart. A faint, raspy chuckle. It was almost lost in the storm noise, but it was definitely a person laughing, low and distorted, like someone was trying to choke it back. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Someone was there, hiding in the dark, and they thought this was funny. To reach the far stairs, I had to pass the open stairwell door. I gripped my flashlight like a club and walked as quickly as I dared. As I came abreast of the dark doorway, I thought I glimpsed movement on the stairs, a shift of a shadow. My heart thundered in my chest. I didn't stop to investigate. I hurried on, eyes fixed forward. I was nearly past it when a figure exploded out of the stairwell behind me. I heard a scuff of a shoe a split second before something slammed into my back, knocking me to the floor. I hit the tiles hard, my flashlight clattering out of my hand. Before I could react, a weight pounced on me, and an arm clamped around my neck in a chokehold. I couldn't breathe. Panic shot through me as I realized a man had ambushed me. He was strong and had me in a vice grip, and I heard a horrific rasping giggle right by my ear. Desperate, I clawed at his arm, my lungs burning. Somehow I wedged my fingers under his forearm enough to pry it slightly loose and gulped a bit of air. With a burst of adrenaline, I drove my elbow back into his ribs. He let out a grunt, and his grip slackened. I twisted free and shoved him off. In the flicker of the hallway light, I saw a gaunt, wild-eyed man crouched on the floor. He snarled at me and lunged. I kicked out blindly, my boot connecting with his shoulder. He yelped, a high-pitched, inhuman sound. I scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could toward the stairwell at the end of the hall. Behind me, the man let out a shriek of rage, a sound that didn't even seem human. I sprinted down the stairs, 3 at a time, the echoes of both our footsteps ringing in the stairwell. He was giving chase, and he was fast. I hit the ground floor door full force, bursting out into the first-floor corridor that led to the old ambulance bay exit. I could hear him closing in, his footfalls rapid and hard behind me. I dashed for the exit. My hands were slick with sweat as I fumbled at the lock on the sliding door. By sheer luck, I got it open just as the man came barreling up behind me. I threw myself outside into the rain and spun around to pull the door shut. The man slammed against the glass on the other side with a crazed face. He was pale, filthy, and soaked, with hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes were open wide, wild and unfocused, and he was screaming incoherently as he pounded on the glass. Thank God, the door locked automatically when closed. He was trapped on the inside. Breathing hard, I stumbled backward into the rain. I never felt so grateful for a downpour. At least it meant someone might notice if I screamed. Keeping my eyes on the door, I grabbed my radio and shakily called for help, notifying dispatch that I was attacked by an intruder. My words tumbled out, but they got the gist. Police and backup were on their way. The man was still at the glass, his face a mask of fury as he slammed a fist repeatedly against it. For a terrifying second, I wondered if he could break through, but the reinforced glass held. Lightning flashed, illuminating him briefly. He looked about 30-something, but terribly emaciated, like he'd been hiding out here for a long time. I could see his mouth contorted in a rageful howl, though through the thunder and glass I only caught muffled sounds. I retreated farther across the parking lot to the small guard booth by the front gate, putting more distance between us. Rain blurred my vision, but I refused to take my eyes off that entrance. My heart was thudding, and I was drenched, shaking from adrenaline and cold. After what felt like an eternity, in reality maybe 10 minutes, 2 police cruisers arrived, lights flashing. I flagged them down frantically. Officers rushed in, and together we carefully re-entered the building through the same door. I insisted they be cautious, warning them about the man. At first we didn't see him. The lobby area was empty except for puddles of rainwater. 1 officer stayed with me, and 2 others began to sweep the halls. We heard a clatter deeper inside. The intruder was still here, making noise in a back corridor or room. The officers followed the sound, shouting, "Police, come out with your hands up." What followed was the most tense minute of my life. I waited in the lobby, hearing shouts echo, and the man screaming in response, something unintelligible. There was a crashing sound of something metal being knocked over. Then I heard the crackle of a taser and a blood-curdling scream. Shortly after, the cops radioed that they had him in custody. They dragged the struggling man out into the lobby. He was handcuffed and yelling gibberish, eyes rolling wildly. Up close under the officers' flashlights, he looked even worse, skin and bones, his clothes caked in grime. The smell coming off him was rank and coppery, making me gag. I don't know what his story was, whether he was a homeless squatter, a drug addict, or something else, but he was clearly not in his right mind. One of the officers stayed with me, asking if I was injured, while the others hauled the man to a squad car. Aside from some bruises and a sore throat, I was okay. He told me quietly that I was lucky I got away. People like that can be extremely dangerous. I gave a brief statement right then and later learned more. The police found a sort of camp in a first-floor storage room. Blankets, canned food, even a bucket for water. It looked like he'd been living there a while. The thought that he might have been watching me on those quiet nights made my skin crawl. By the time I finally sat in my own car, dawn was breaking. I was exhausted, soaked, and shaking with leftover fear. I won't lie, I broke down crying from relief and shock once I locked my doors. I quit that security job the very next day. No paycheck is worth going through something like that again. To this day, I have nightmares about that night. Even now, I always double-check the locks when I go to bed. And sometimes I sleep with a light on. I still have nightmares about that night, seeing his crazed eyes staring at me or hearing that awful laugh behind me in a dark hallway. I never found out exactly who the man was or what caused him to snap, but I learned one thing. You don't need ghosts to be terrified on the night shift. The scariest things can be the real people right there with you in the dark. Story 2. In the summer of 2019, I was working the graveyard shift at a small gas station off a lonely highway in Arizona. I was 26 and figured the worst part of the job would be fighting boredom and trying to stay awake. I never imagined how dangerous one quiet night could become. Most nights were uneventful. A few truckers or late-night travelers stopping in. Sometimes around 3 a.m., I'd jump at shadows or imagine I heard footsteps when it was just the ice machine clunking. I even half-jokingly thought the place might be haunted because one of my coworkers liked to share local ghost stories. But it wasn't ghosts I should have been worried about. One Wednesday night in July, I hadn't seen a customer for over an hour. It was past 2:30 a.m., the heat of the day finally giving way to a cooler desert breeze. I was leaning on the counter, absently watching the security monitor screens. 4 small black and white displays showed different camera views. The pumps outside, the empty store aisles, the stockroom, and the back delivery door. Everything was still and silent, so I started wiping down the counter to keep myself alert. That's when I noticed on the monitor a pair of headlights swing into our lot. A dusty old sedan pulled up to one of the pumps. My nerves prickled a bit. I didn't recognize the car, and we didn't get many sedans at that hour, mostly big rigs or pickups. 2 figures sat in the front seat. They didn't start pumping gas or come inside. They just idled there for maybe 30 seconds. I couldn't see their faces clearly on the grainy camera, but the odd behavior set me on edge. Finally, the driver killed the engine. Both front doors opened, and 2 men stepped out. They talked briefly, then one, a tall, lanky guy in a baseball cap, started walking toward the convenience store entrance. The other, shorter and heavyset, stayed by the car, casually messing with the pump. My stomach flipped. The way the second guy hung back felt deliberate, like he was a lookout. Trying to calm the slight rush of fear in my chest, I stepped out from behind the counter as the door chimed and the tall man entered. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with rough stubble and sun-leathered skin. His baseball cap was pulled low, and when he smiled at me, it didn't reach his cold, pale eyes. Something about that smile put me on edge immediately. "Evenin'," I greeted him, forcing a polite smile. "Let me know if you need any help finding something." "Sure thing," he said. His voice had a strange, slow drawl. He broke eye contact quickly and wandered toward the snack aisle. I kept him in my peripheral vision while pretending to straighten some gum packs on the front display. My heart was thumping harder than it should for just a normal customer, but my gut was telling me something was off. The man spent barely 10 seconds in the snack aisle, then walked up to the counter with an energy drink. He plopped it down and gave me that eerie half-smile again. I rang him up, and as I did, I noticed his hand was trembling and sweat shone on his forehead, despite the blasting AC. "That all for you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My eyes flicked to the parking lot through the window. The second man was still out there by the pump, but now he was standing oddly still, looking toward the entrance. "Yeah, that's it," the man said. He slid a few crumpled dollar bills across the counter. I made change and handed it back to him with the receipt. "Have a good night," I managed, my voice a bit tight. He didn't leave right away. He lingered, slowly picking up his drink and looking me over in a way that made my skin crawl. "Quiet night, huh?" he asked casually. "Yeah, pretty quiet," I replied, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. He just kept tapping his fingers on the counter, eyes flicking toward the door. It felt like he was waiting for something, some cue. A cold realization washed through me. He was stalling. My instincts screamed at me to act. I inched my hand below the counter toward the silent alarm button. Just then, through the window, I saw the heavy-set man suddenly start striding toward the entrance. The tall man's friendly facade vanished as his eyes met his partner's. They were making their move. I slapped the alarm button and stumbled back just as the first man shoved the door open violently. The first man threw the door open so hard the bell sensor didn't even chime. It just smacked against the wall. The friendly mask was gone from his face. His eyes were wild now. The second man stepped in right behind him, quickly moving to block the exit. I saw that he had a tire iron in his hand, which made my stomach lurch with fear. "We're closed," I blurted out, stupidly. Of course we weren't closed. It was a 24-hour station, but terror was taking over my mouth. "Shut up. Get over here," the tall man snarled at me. He yanked a knife out from under his shirt, a wicked-looking hunting knife. My blood ran cold at the sight of the blade. For a split second, I froze behind the counter, panic threatening to paralyze me. The heavy-set man by the door locked the deadbolt, securing the door shut. My heart sank. They didn't want anyone else coming in. The tall man with the knife stepped toward the counter. "Open the register," he hissed through clenched teeth. I fumbled to comply, not wanting to give him any reason to jump at me. With shaking fingers, I pulled the register drawer open. He leaned over, keeping the knife pointed in my direction, and started shoveling the cash into his jacket pocket. "Okay, take it and go," I stammered, hoping maybe robbery was all they intended. My eyes flicked between the two of them. The one by the door was breathing heavily, adrenaline evident on his face. He kept glancing out at the road, then back at me with a predatory expression. I had the awful realization that they weren't wearing masks or disguises. They didn't even care that I could see their faces. That sent a new stab of terror through me, because if a robber doesn't care that you can identify him, it often means he's planning not to leave you as a witness. "Please, just take the money and go," I urged again, voice trembling. The tall man emptied the last of the bills from the till. Then he reached across the counter with surprising speed and grabbed my wrist. "Not so fast," he growled, twisting my arm and pulling me halfway over the counter. I yelped in pain and fear. "We're gonna have a little after-hours road trip. You're coming with us." Tears pricked my eyes as reality set in. They intended to kidnap me. "No, please," I gasped, struggling, but his grip was iron. He waved the knife inches from my face, and I instantly went still, a sob catching in my throat. The other man unlocked the front door and poked his head out to check the lot. "Hurry up," he urged. "No lights coming. Let's get her in the car." The tall man tugged me around the counter, still holding the knife at my side. My mind was racing frantically. I remembered that the silent alarm had been pressed, but there was no way help would arrive in time if they got me in that car. I had to do something. Now, he dragged me toward the door. In seconds, I'd be outside and out of sight from the road. My eyes darted wildly for anything I could use as a weapon. My hand brushed the small canister of pepper spray on my belt. Store policy allowed us to carry one. In all the chaos, I'd forgotten I had it. Moving on pure adrenaline and instinct, I let my knees buckle as if I were fainting, momentarily throwing the tall man off balance. As he cursed and tried to haul me up, I snatched the pepper spray from my belt with my free hand, turned my face away, and sprayed it blindly behind me, right into his face. He screamed, a horrible, high-pitched scream, and let go of me to claw at his eyes. I stumbled free, hearing the heavier man shout in surprise. Without pausing, I bolted. Instead of running out into the dark where they wanted to take me, I sprinted toward the back of the store. The stockroom had a heavy door. If I could get there, maybe I could barricade myself inside. I heard the heavy-set man cursing and the scramble of him trying to help his partner. I dashed into the back hallway that led to the stockroom and in bathrooms. Behind me, the taller man was roaring in pain and rage, but I didn't glance back. I slammed the stockroom door shut and threw the bolt latch. It was a thick wooden door, thankfully. Within seconds, they reached it and began pounding from the other side. My heart felt like it would explode. I grabbed a metal stool and jammed it up under the doorknob for extra measure, then looked around the dark stockroom for any other way out. There was a small high window, but far too small to crawl through. I was trapped, but at least they couldn't easily get in. They kicked and thudded on the door, the frame shuddering. "Get out here, you little asterisk asterisk asterisk," the tall man bellowed, voice raw, likely from the pepper spray burning his throat and eyes. I saw the tip of the knife blade stab through the door once, splintering the wood. I stifled a scream and stumbled back, pressing myself against shelves of motor oil and supplies. I clamped my hands over my mouth, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. I was so scared I felt detached from my own body. In my head I kept pleading, "Please, please hurry," praying the police got my alarm. Just when I thought the door would break under their assault, I heard the jingle of the front doorbell and a booming male voice shouting, "Drop it." There was a burst of commotion, angry yelling, and then 2 gunshots that made my ears ring. I screamed before I could stop myself, dropping to the floor behind a shelf. Over the ringing in my ears, I heard someone shout, "On the ground, now." Then, abruptly, everything went quiet. I sat curled on the stockroom floor, shaking like a leaf. A moment later, I heard a familiar voice call my name. "Claire, it's okay. Come on out. It's Sam." Sam was a regular long-haul trucker who often stopped by around this time for coffee. With wobbling legs, I pulled the stool from under the knob and opened the door. Sam stood there in his flannel shirt, looking concerned and holding a shotgun. On the floor of the store, the 2 attackers were face down, disarmed, with another man, an off-duty sheriff's deputy, keeping a gun trained on them. As it turned out, Sam had shown up for his usual coffee and immediately noticed something wrong. The store lights were off, the door was ajar, and he heard me scream. By pure luck, he had flagged down a passing car on the highway, which happened to be an off-duty deputy heading home. They rushed in together. The deputy had his concealed pistol and fired those warning shots, ordering the men to the ground, while Sam covered them with his shotgun. Caught by surprise and half-blinded by pepper spray, the 2 attackers surrendered without much more fight. The relief that washed over me was so overwhelming, I almost collapsed into Sam's arms, sobbing. Within minutes, the place was swarming with flashing red and blue lights as on-duty police arrived. They took my statement and commended my quick thinking, and Sam's. The 2 men were arrested on a laundry list of charges. Later, I learned they were drifters who had already committed a string of robberies and a carjacking across multiple states. If Sam and that deputy hadn't intervened when they did, I might not be here to tell this story. I quit the gas station job immediately. I wasn't about to work another night there after that nightmare. It took me a long time to feel safe driving alone at night, or even being by myself in any public place late. I still have nightmares about those 2 men and that knife at my throat. But I'm forever grateful to my 2 unexpected heroes. That night, I learned to trust my instincts and to never take safety for granted. Real monsters aren't just the ghosts from scary stories. They're flesh and blood people with evil intentions, I was lucky to survive my graveyard shift ordeal, and I'll never forget it. Story 3. In the fall of 2020, I was working a night shift as the only nurse at a small psychiatric hospital in rural Oregon. My coworker had gone home sick, leaving just me and an orderly on duty. We had about a dozen patients, mostly low risk, but one in particular had me on edge. Jacob. Jacob was a large man in his 30s with schizophrenia and a history of violence when off his meds. He'd been stable for weeks, but that evening he paced and gave me an unsettling grin when I handed him his medication. I had a bad feeling about him. By 2 a.m., the ward was quiet and dim. Still, I had a nagging feeling about Jacob and decided to do a round to make sure everything was okay. I walked down the corridor, flashlight in hand. Through each door window, I saw patients asleep in their beds, until I reached room 9 at the end. Jacob's door was open about an inch. My pulse jumped. It was supposed to be locked. I gently pushed it open and shone my flashlight in. Jacob's bed was empty, the sheets thrown aside. On the floor, I saw his nightly pills scattered about. He had palmed them and skipped his dose, fooling me earlier. My stomach lurched. I stepped back and whispered urgently into my radio. "Mike, come in. Patient missing." "Jacob is out of his room." Only static answered. At that moment, the hallway lights snapped off, plunging me into darkness. Someone had hit the light switch at the end of the hall. My hand shook as I swept the flashlight beam around. "Jacob," I called quietly, "you need to return to your room, okay? You're not in trouble. Let's just go back and talk." I tried to sound calm, even as my heart pounded. Then I heard a distorted, childlike giggle in the darkness ahead. I swung the flashlight beam around frantically, trying to pinpoint the source. I strafed the flashlight over the hall and noticed the door of the linen closet was open. I caught a hint of movement inside. I aimed the light into the closet. In the corner, a tall silhouette stood among the hanging sheets. It was Jacob. He was barefoot and still in his hospital pajamas, and in his hand he gripped a long, sharpened sliver of metal, maybe part of a hanger. He stepped forward, eyes reflecting in my flashlight's glare, and put a finger to his lips. "Sheh," he whispered, giving me that same chilling grin. "You'll wake the others." He let out a soft little laugh that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to speak evenly. "Jacob, let's go back to your room and get your medicine. You'll feel better, I promise." I lowered my flashlight beam a little, not wanting to blind or agitate him. He moved out of the closet, and I could see the weapon in his hand more clearly. A broken metal rod with a jagged point. My mouth went dry. "They lied to me," Jacob sing-songed. "Said I needed the pills to keep him away. I didn't take them." His grip tightened on the makeshift weapon. Jacob was blocking the hallway, clearly in a dangerous delusion. My heart thundered as I realized I had to stop him before he hurt someone. Summoning all my courage, I lunged forward to knock the weapon from his hand. We crashed together in the narrow hall. Jacob was strong and driven by frenzy. He trapped me against the wall and swung the metal shard wildly, slicing a hot line of pain across my upper arm. I bit back a scream and grabbed his wrist with both hands, wrestling for control. After a brief, desperate struggle, I managed to slam his arm against the wall. The improvised knife clattered to the floor. Jacob roared in anger and shoved me with shocking force. I stumbled backward, my arm burning from the gash and warm blood soaking my sleeve. His wild eyes fell on my flashlight, which I dropped in the scuffle. He snatched it up, holding it like a club. He turned back to me with a crazed look, gripping my heavy flashlight like a bat. I braced myself as he rushed at me. Suddenly, the orderly finally arrived and tackled Jacob hard to the floor. Jacob hit the ground and fought viciously, but the orderly is a big guy. He managed to pin Jacob down just as 2 police officers arrived. Afterward, Jacob was moved to a more secure facility and back on his medication. I needed some stitches for the cut on my arm and had a mild concussion, but I recovered fully. I didn't quit, but I did switch to the day shift and urged management to improve night security. Even now, I feel a chill when I remember that dark hallway and Jacob's eerie laugh. The scariest thing in that hospital wasn't a ghost at all. It was a real person in the throes of a breakdown. I learned that night to never let my guard down, no matter how quiet a shift seems.